Hey folks, we want to get going here. It's all a little bit there. Okay, MPs. You guys are all, excuse me, MPs, you're on camera, and good to see you. But you know, it's very nice to see everybody getting along so well after just finishing question period.
We do get along.
So if I can get everybody's attention, it's Thursday afternoon. Let's get rolling here. Panelists via video. Sorry for getting everybody in order here, but we're good to go. Thank you for joining us today. This is a continuation of our study we're doing on the future opportunities with our trading partners, Mexico and the United States. Just to let you know, we've already had quite a few presenters come forward to us, stakeholders in Canada, but we also visit the western states, the United States. Next week we are going to be going to Detroit, Michigan, and we're going to go to Chicago, Illinois, and we're going to be finishing up next week in Washington for a couple days. We also have plans in the fall to go to the Midwestern states and also our trading partner in Mexico. So we have a very ambitious agenda, and it's very important right now, and we're very honored that you people have come to join us today and do your presentations. My understanding is we have with us Honda, Toyota, and Toyota Manufacturing Canada, and Mr. Wartz, you are kind of our head guy there, and the floor is yours, sir, and use what time you need, and then we can, the quicker the better, and we can have dialogue with the MPs, and we can continue on with our afternoon. So go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to address the Standing Committee on International Trade on the proposed reopening of NAFTA. I am David Wirtz, Executive Director of JAMA Canada, and joining me today on the video conference is Hanif Nori, Honda Canada, Stephen Beattie from Toyota Canada, Scott McKenzie from Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada. JAMA Canada represents the Canadian subsidiaries of Japanese automakers, which include Hino Motors Canada, Honda Canada, Mazda Canada, Mitsubishi Motor Sales Canada, Nissan Canada, Subaru Canada, Toyota Canada, and Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada. A variety of light-duty vehicles, engines, and medium-duty trucks are currently being built in Canada by Hino Motors Canada, Honda Canada, and Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada. Let me first outline our recommendations for updating NAFTA. JAMA Canada strongly supports the continuation of the NAFTA as a trilateral trade agreement, recognizing that 3 out of every 4 Japanese brand sales in Canada are vehicles built in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Moreover, the success of NAFTA for the auto industry stems from a single set of rules established through uniform regulations, which has allowed automakers to develop highly integrated supply chains and production facilities across the region, allowing increasing levels of trade in both vehicles and parts to the benefit of all NAFTA countries. The current NAFTA automotive rules of origin should be retained. To be effective, rules of origin in modern trade agreements should be clear, simple, predictable, flexible, and easily administered. It is also important to recognize that NAFTA automotive rules of origin have the highest regional content thresholds and do not include any country-specific sourcing. Improvements to modernize NAFTA in the 21st century include updating and expanding the list of job opportunities for temporary entry of business persons, update customs and trade facilitation provisions recognizing the integrated nature of the global supply chains in North America and around the world, update border infrastructure with mechanisms to address bottlenecks, create additional framework agreements within NAFTA, for example, for automated vehicles, data flows, cybersecurity, or other measures that facilitate e-commerce, increase regulatory cooperation with flexibility to align or mutual recognition of major international standards, for example, UNECE and US FMVSS. Finally, as a general rule, we strongly recommend not including any provisions in trade agreements that signatories don't want to use or will have used against them. JAMA Canada supports liberalized trade, such as NAFTA, for delivering mutual benefits to trade partners that enhance competitiveness for both automakers and parts suppliers, encourage adoption of advanced technologies to provide safe and sustainable mobility for consumers that meet their transportation needs, and to provide reliable long-term employment for skilled and highly qualified Canadians. The auto industry in Canada is built on a foundation of open trade and continues to be highly trade-dependent and deeply integrated in North America. Looking at the NAFTA region as a whole, Japanese automakers have made significant long-term commitments to localization under the principle of build where we sell. Japanese automakers have established a high-quality manufacturing and R&D presence in North America based on the NAFTA framework. The NAFTA framework has made North America a highly integrated and globally competitive region for automotive manufacturing and trade. JAMA and JAMA Canada hope for a framework that will continue to support and strengthen the competitiveness of the North American auto industry. Let me turn to summarize the impact and benefits that have arisen in Canada from liberalized trade and illustrate the build where we sell principle. Since 1965, 15.8 million Japanese brand vehicles have been sold in Canada. Since 1986, 17.4 million Japanese brand vehicles have been built in Canada. In the mid-1980s, virtually 100% of our sales were vehicles made in Japan. In 2016, 76% of Japanese brand vehicles sold in Canada were locally built in North America. About 29% were built in Canada, 36% were built in the US, and 11% were built in Mexico. When the Canada-US FTA came into force in 1989, Japanese brand light vehicle production in Canada was a little more than 100,000 units annually. In 1999, 5 years after the NAFTA was implemented, output had climbed to about 500,000 units annually. And in 2016, production had doubled to over 1 million units for the first time. Needless to say, the investment and growth of production in Canada would not have happened without open access to the much larger U.S. market through preferential trade agreements like the Canada-US FTA and NAFTA. As a result, currently over 77,000 direct and indirect jobs have been created in Canada, including sales, service, distribution, manufacture, export and import of vehicles and parts. Let me conclude by saying that while our success in Canada has been based on a foundation of liberalized trade in North America, Canada must also pursue other opportunities to be actively connected to the increasingly interdependent global economy. With the CETA recently completed and the Canada-Korea FTA fully implemented, we look forward to Canada securing a free trade agreement with Japan, whether bilaterally or multilaterally, in the near future. Thank you, and we all look forward to any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, sir. And just for the record, I drive a Tacoma. My wife drives a Honda Civic, so we're doing all right. So, and they're working well. So we're going to start off with questioning, and we're going to go right to Mr. Hoback. And
I was under the impression that they all had a presentation, but they don't.
oh, sorry, you have more presentations, sir?
No, that's it. We're all here to answer questions.
That's what I understood. Okay,
it's fine.
sorry, that was just a little misunderstanding here. But we're going to start off with dialogue with the MPs, and we're going to have Mr. Hoback up, Conservatives, for the first 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And gentlemen, in some of the earlier testimony and some of the meetings I've had with other manufacturers in North America, they talk about the regulations and trying to get the regulations right so we have the same standards and actually create a North American standard for the auto sector here in North America. What's your opinion on that and any advice on pursuing that?
Well, certainly, from a JAMA Canada perspective, we're certainly, as we mentioned, in favor of alignment of the regulatory environment in North America. We have been supporting the Regulatory Cooperation Council and their activities in that regard, and we think it just shouldn't be exclusively one set of standards, but there should be the opportunity for flexibility to recognize other global standards as well.
Okay, so then with these regulations, then do you see that as being something that should be done in the NAFTA agreement right now, or is this something that should be done on the side of NAFTA?
If I may, one of the things that we look at is that there's in essence that regulatory cooperation initiative underway to look at existing regulations and how they line up. That's one activity, and I think it's a valid one, but it probably isn't the more significant piece of this puzzle. As we're moving forward, technology is moving very rapidly, and particularly in areas like connected vehicle technology and automated vehicles. And in that space, certainly the Toyota point of view would be that there is an opportunity in the context of NAFTA to be trying to set up a framework agreement so that we actually create a common set of rules here in North America. That has a couple of benefits. One, vehicles travel back and forth across borders in North America. Mm-hmm. But two, by setting a common set of standards for the North American marketplace, you're going to get vehicles at the lowest possible cost to consumers in ways that make them most easily manufacturable here in the region as well. So I think both from an industry standpoint and from a consumer standpoint, putting that type of framework agreement in place would be a valuable addition to NAFTA.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there, because I was going to go there next. My next question, when we start looking at the new technologies and vehicles talking to vehicles, and I want to make sure that a Ford can talk to a Toyota, can talk to a Honda when it's driving down the road, especially as we go to automated, driverless cars and stuff like that. But one of the other concerns I have is when you take that car, and let's say we're in Windsor and it's going across the border, and all of a sudden it goes across the border and it's using data now of the U.S. So you're going from an unlimited data package in Canada, and now you're going to $10 a megabyte in the U.S. Have you put any thought into what should be done in regards to solving some of those problems, so that as that vehicle crosses the border, the owner may not even be using his phone or the data on the phone, but it may be the car itself using that data. How do we handle those types of things?
So I would say, again, from the standpoint of the way that our vehicles perform, they will roam in both markets, so that it's covered by part of your existing data package. But above and beyond the cost of the data itself is the question of how do you treat the privacy of the data that's flowing in and out of the car when you move between jurisdictions. So again, those issues of privacy and security, I think, lend themselves to that type of a North American strategy. So we can handle the commercial side of it, but the sort of legal framework in which it operates, I think it's very important for that government-to-government dialogue. Okay.
And of course, we've got some great technology companies here in Canada, but it seems like they can't sell in here in Canada. So what are you doing to reach out to technology companies here in Canada to take advantage of that world-leading technology? It's amazing. You'll see Canadian companies go down to the States to buy Canadian technology instead of buying it from here locally here in Canada. So are you working with other technology companies here in Canada? And I'm kind of thinking like your dashboards. And again, getting back to the fact that we start getting cars talking to cars, the safety aspect of the benefits that will provide. Where do you see that going?
Well, again, across the industry, our companies are working with a variety of suppliers, including a number of Canadian suppliers. There certainly has been a lot of spin-off from the BlackBerry group into organizations like QNX, but beyond them into companies with security technology and so forth. And that's being rolled up into technologies delivered by Toyota, as an example. But I think that's true across the industry. There's an opportunity for those joint ventures.
And they'll all be open architecture?
Yes, but with a very serious look, manufacturer by manufacturer, at how to maintain data integrity and security.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Holbach. And we're going to go over to the Liberals now. Madame Lapointe, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Merci beaucoup. C'est très intéressant ce que...
Thank you very much. It's highly interesting what you've been saying since we got started, and my colleague Mr. Albach asked his questions. You spoke about new technologies and autonomous vehicles. We are trying them out in Blainville in northern Quebec, just to the north of my riding, and that's where we are trialling these self-driven vehicles. Now, what do you take into consideration? You are representing Japanese vehicle industry. You seem to be thinking about the possibility of having cross-cutting standards when it comes to technology across the board, from one country to another and manufacturer to another.
So it's already the case in the auto industry that we work toward very broad-based standards but use different technologies in order to achieve those technology outcomes. What is very important is not the specifics of the technology in the vehicle, but the protocol for communication car to car. And amongst the other things that we look at is how to maintain the integrity of the message that will travel from a vehicle to another vehicle or to built infrastructure. And so that's one of the areas where a lot of research is being done here in Canada in terms of that data security and integrity. In the same way that today cell phones talk to each other, but offer different styles, different design, different operating systems, you're going to see that in the auto industry as well. But it's how we make it all work together that's going to be the important question, and where the industry works together and in collaboration with government to ensure those standards are in place.
Est-ce que vous croyez qu'en ayant le nouvel accord,
Do you think that with a new NAFTA that we could address that kind of problem and fix it by reopening NAFTA?
Right. I think the opportunity, since we're going back to the table to have those negotiations, is to address some of those areas that were not dealt with at the time with the original free trade agreement, and do it in a constructive way that creates opportunity, but also ensures consumer safety. So I think that's where the opportunity of this renegotiation is, not so much on dealing with the rules of origin and other elements of the package.
tantôt vous avez parlé de flexibilité.
Earlier you spoke about flexibility in terms of standards. Could you please speak at greater length regarding flexibility? There are different standards in various jurisdictions, particularly in Mexico. What would you like to see in terms of global standards?
Well, I think the two global standards that we mentioned particularly were the U.S. standards, which are extant in certainly in North America, but because of the CETA and because of the global trade with other jurisdictions that particularly in CETA with UNECE standards, and the fact that Japan is moving towards UNECE standards as well, and in recognition of that it makes sense to have as much flexibility as necessary to be able to support the operations here in Canada, but also in North America and around the world.
Et plus spécifiquement, quand vous parlez de flexibilité, c'est
And more specifically, when you refer to flexibility, do you mean broadly speaking with respect to Europe? Do you think NAFTA, how would NAFTA become more flexible when it comes to facilitating free trade? What do you envisage?
Well, that's, I guess, a broader discussion that has to include the U.S. that they began to discuss in the TTIP. But I think it can come down to alignment in some respects and mutual recognition of those standards, and being able to be flexible enough to accommodate those of a high standard.
OK, merci. Et si advenant qu'on ne réussissait pas à avoir une entente,
Now, were we not able to reach an agreement between Mexico, US, and Canada, what do you think we could have a bilateral agreement with, on the one hand, Mexico, and on the other hand, the US? Two separate bilateral agreements?
No, we're not advocating for for separate bilaterals. We think we should maintain the trilateral nature of the NAFTA, including on regulatory standards.
merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam LaPointe. And we're going to move over to the NDP now, and I'm glad to see Mr. Duval here from Hamilton Mountain. Welcome again.
Thank you.
And the NDP's got the floor now for 5 minutes, so go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you for your presentation today. And I'd like to pick up where Madame Lapointe left off. And if you could dig a little further and elaborate on some of the advantages and disadvantages of the trilateral trade, because ultimately, the U.S. may indicate to us that they want to convert NAFTA, from its single trilateral into bilaterals. So can you speak more specifically about advantages and disadvantages of the trilateral agreement that exists?
Could I start on that and just sort of a general
Yep.
plane and just say this. From a manufacturing standpoint, I think every vehicle manufacturer would say the same thing to you. We are not hung up about where you set the bar on standards, but what we do want to have is as large a consumer marketplace as we possibly can, because of the incredible expense in developing new technologies for powertrain, for connectivity, for safety. The best result for the consumer is for us to manufacture in volume for the largest possible consumer marketplace. It amortizes the cost of development of those technologies across that broader consumer market. And so high standards shared amongst 3 countries will be a much better outcome from a manufacturing efficiency standpoint, from a public safety standpoint, than a welter of bilateral arrangements. So, and I will say that one of our conversations in terms of where we go with this is ultimately we'd like to see common regulatory standards between the United States and Europe, because it doesn't make sense for us to make small changes in vehicles based on testing standards where the actual outcome of performance of the vehicle is very close. But that's where it comes down today, is that a lot of it comes down to technical detail of the standard, not in terms of the real performance of the vehicle. So when we talk about mutual recognition, it's about speeding the flow of those technologies to the consumer marketplace.
Okay, my question is to now Honda and Toyota specifically. I'm just wondering, in your plans, where you go forward from here. Obviously, you're expanding, you're growing your North American platform. If you can speak individually from your company's perspective as to, where those plans are developing next. Will there be investment in Canada? Are you looking at investment in the U.S. or investment in Mexico kind of as your next step? Just out of curiosity as to where you see your potential market growth.
In terms of market growth, this is Scott McKenzie from Toyota. Market growth for us would probably be another market, whether it be Europe or elsewhere. In terms of investments, we are planning investing in Canada at our manufacturing facilities in Cambridge and Woodstock. We have plans in place to reinvest and continue to manufacture high-quality vehicles in Canada for the Canadian market and the U.S. market, but it is important to recognize that at least in our operations, 80% of our vehicles are going to the U.S. market.
And if I can add, this is Anik Nori at Honda. Scott's obviously more of an expert on this than I am, but the North American market right now is generally moving towards compact SUVs. At least we found that our product in the U.S. especially, that's where it's growing, and we build that the CR-V in Alliston, and like Toyota, the majority of our product is exported to the U.S. About 75% of it. So as you can see, the investment opportunity here is dependent on us being able to build product that can be exported to other jurisdictions. Obviously, we can't absorb all of it, and so. When it comes to making those investment decisions, which are made in large part in consultation with, if not by our head offices overseas, they sort of look at where the market is, where it's going, and I think the tripartite agreement and the way the structure is in North America right now lends itself to favorable decisions being made in terms of investments in Canada.
So my next question is really about that, highly integrated supply chain that exists. We certainly heard that from other automotive manufacturers when they've been before the committee, and I think we understand that well. So I wonder if you can speak to us about what a disruption to that chain would look like for you, and how you would address that type of disruption.
It'll have to be a short answer, please.
It'd be almost impossible to address quickly. A lot of our sourcing decisions are made several years out. Right now, more than 50% of our content and our vehicles made in Cambridge and Woodstock is coming from the United States. Any trade-related impact to that is going to affect our profitability and also our ability to produce not a low-cost car, but an optimally priced car for our customers.
Well, thank you, sir. And we're going to move over to the Liberals now. And Madam Ludwig, you've got 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to continue on with Ms. Ramsey's question on the disruption and the potential that might have. And I'm wondering if you could speak specifically to if there was a disruption in trade between, in this case, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, what that might mean to jobs on the Canadian side as well as on the American side.
In simple terms, Toyota manufactured 600,000 vehicles in Canada last year, and we sold about 215,000 around there. If we don't have access to the United States market, we would have to find another market in order to sell our vehicles. And I don't know if there's a lot of markets available right now that we could export to that would make up anywhere close to the market that the U.S. provides to us.
Then, if I may add, just add further on my question, next week as a trade committee, we're actually heading out to Detroit, and I'm just wondering if you could, if 50% of your content is imported from the United States, and if there was a disruption in trade with the U.S., maybe it's a border tax, maybe it's other issues, maybe it's additional duties, what that might mean on the American side for jobs in terms of the supply of content. If we're purchasing that volume from the United States.
In the short term, not much, because again, those sourcing decisions are made several years out, and we wouldn't be able to make decisions quick enough to affect that. In the long term, sourcing decisions and also vehicle allocation decisions would gradually move the manufacturing and final assembly closer to the market that they're sold in. So there would be a natural inclination to, build where you sell even more currently, and natural forces would force that towards the United States.
Or if the costs of compliance in a revised NAFTA become too high, it's important to remember that the external duty rate that the U.S. applies to cars is 2.5%. So a cost increase beyond 2.5% might very well lead some manufacturers to decide to relocate manufacturing out of the region.
Okay.
So I think there's a real downside to disrupting those supply chains.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm wondering about R&D, so research and development. Where does that largely take place? Is that in Canada? Is it in the United States? Is it completely outside of North America?
It's generally done in the United States. Some of it in Japan, but the majority is in the United States right now. We do some of it in here, but a lot of it is related to cold weather testing and testing whether our vehicles can match up to the Canadian winters, especially when it comes to when it comes to electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles and things like that.
So, but the testing is actually done in the U.S. in terms of a cold climate, like for Canada?
But that part of it is done in Canada.
Okay. Thank you. I'm wondering if you could just explain to us the share of the operations in terms of your industries between Canada, the United States, and Mexico in terms of plant operations. What percentage is in each country?
We're producing about a million vehicles a year currently in Canada. It's probably close to 3.5 million in the United States, and in Mexico, I think it's probably around 500,000 units, but I could be wrong on the specifics. Okay. I don't have the data right now.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is regarding pre-clearance. So we've heard from other witnesses before this committee talk about the significance of pre-clearance. Yes, I know as a government we've been looking at airports, but what about would there be an opportunity for maybe streamlining some of the efficiencies with the border crossings if the manifests, we continued on with manifests for e-manifests and pre-clearance of goods in Canada to go into the U.S. and vice versa?
We're both Toyota and Honda are just-in-time manufacturing facilities. Pre-clearance is honestly necessary for us, to have a smooth flow of parts across the border. Any interruptions to that, if they extend long enough, can be massive problems for us. So yeah, we would like to keep what we have, and if not, improve it.
Okay, do I have more time?
No, that's about right on. So
Okay.
thank you for that, and we're going to move over. That's the first round done, and we're going to move over to Mr. Peters. Go ahead. You got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. I understand that you guys are in Markham. I take it, I'm just assuming, are you guys at Honda right now?
Yes, they are.
Perfect.
Proudly at Honda.
Yeah, good stuff. I'm from Newmarket, Aurora, so I'm just one riding north of you guys. But we go. I just want to look out the window and see how the 404 North traffic is, because I hope to be in it in about a couple hours if I get my flight on time. So how's the traffic looking so far? Not bad. I'll be passing there in a couple.
It's always good around.
I hope to be driving by there in a couple hours if all goes well. And if I get to my questions, we'll get out of here sooner, so I'll start doing that. But anyway, I wanted to touch a little bit on, and I know, Stephen, good to see you again. David, good to see you. I've worked with you gentlemen in the past. I was affiliated and worked with Magna for a number of years, not too far from where you guys are. But we always get a sense, and I know, David, you represent more than just Toyota and Honda. What are the other manufacturers that you represent?
All the Japanese brand companies that are selling in Canada, we represent the subsidiaries here in Canada. We're not representing the global operations of the companies from Japan.
Right, but their presence in Canada. But I mean, obviously, Toyota and Honda are key members of your group. But let people know the sense that it's bigger than just those two, of course.
Right, and just to make the point that Hino is also manufacturing here in Canada with a plant in Woodstock, making medium-duty trucks specifically for the Canadian market.
Right. So I kind of want to dig a little deeper, and I just want to know if there's any distinction or space between the position of some of the Japanese manufacturers when it comes to NAFTA, when it comes to free trade, when it comes to things like consolidating regulations and that. Or do you speak? Is there some dissenting voice in your association, David, or even between Honda and Toyota as you're both there? Or are these sorts of things kind of everyone's united about the importance of these free trade agreements and the regulatory change that may follow?
Yeah, well, I would say we, as JAMA Canada, we tend to operate on a consensus basis with all of our members. So, I would say that's probably the case.
I think it's also important to understand that every one of our member companies manufactures in the NAFTA region. So, the experiences that we have importing or exporting from Canada are the same experiences that other member companies have from their operations in the U.S. or Mexico if they don't manufacture here. So there's a common vision.
Right, and historically, I think it's I know Toyota numbers from 2000 to 2015 maybe. The footprint in Canada and North America, the number of cars sold in Canada. Those that are produced in North America, Canada has grown over that time frame. Does that continue to be the case, and is that also the case for Honda and some of the other members of your organization?
Yeah, so on behalf of Toyota, it certainly is increasing, and investments continue to be made. Scott's identified, but the same is true at Honda, and I think Hanif wants to expand on that.
Well, I was just going to say, obviously, we made an investment earlier on this year, so we're looking. We built 400,000 last year. 75% of our vehicles go to the States, but 100,000. Our sales numbers.
Excuse me, sir. You might want to get a little closer to the mic. Get closer to the mic there. Okay, and just repeat your comments, if you may.
I was just going to echo what Steve said. That we, as Honda, have been investing more in Canada, and our production numbers have gone up, and our sales numbers continue to grow. So.
That's good. And am I fair to make the assumption that some of that growth, or most of that increased capacity in North America and in Canada is a result of NAFTA and the integrated supply chain and those sorts of things that flow from NAFTA?
Absolutely.
It's 100% attributable to NAFTA. I mean, both of us started manufacturing in the late 1980s. In Toyota's case, it was initial 50,000 units. We made just over 600,000 units last year, last calendar year, and I would say with 80% of that going to the United States, then yes, NAFTA is a singular reason for our growth.
Excellent.
In fact, Scott's being a little modest. TMMC is the largest manufacturing operation in Toyota globally by volume, so it's been a substantial increase.
Okay, that's good. I think I'm almost out of time, but thank you, gentlemen. Honda, we love having you in York Region. Stephen, if Toyota's ever looking for some space in York Region, let me know, and we'll see if we can help you out.
Sure. All right, here we go.
Okay, Mr. Peterson, your time is up, but that was good promo at the end, and we're going to move on now to the Conservatives, and they have 5 minutes. Mr. Van Kersen, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. It's good to see you again. I was always curious, and I think I know the answer, but I'd like you to tell me why, when so many other manufacturers chose Mexico or United States, Honda and Toyota chose to make a substantial investment in Canada. And I know the dollar is a factor in that. What other reason is there that you chose to make Canada probably your leading manufacturing spot in North America? Mr. Beattie, or
honestly,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to hand it to Scott McKenzie.
Honestly, speak on Toyota's behalf, but I would expect that Honda's would be the same answer. We've got great people here, people that we hire as part of our talent pool, and that could be technical people, it could be manufacturing people as well. We have a tremendous reputation for quality. I think the Japanese OEMs, and actually not just the Japanese OEMs, actually all of the OEMs in Ontario have a tremendous record in terms of manufacturing.
We're losing you there.
We're recognized within Toyota as being, one of the best or highest quality manufacturers globally. And we've got reliable production. They can bank on us for the units that they order. And we've never had any concerns with explaining that we're a valued entity within Toyota.
So I'm going to address the elephant in the room. The way I see it, United States, and specifically Donald Trump, has a real problem with the Midwest. That is that much of their manufacturing has moved either to Canada, especially to the United States in way of North American automakers. What happens if Donald Trump says tomorrow, geez, fellas, we'd love to have you sell your cars here, but you're going to have to start making them here? What point, I guess, would you either comply, or is that a consideration? Is that something that you're considering at this point?
I think it's fair to say that we already do manufacture substantially in the U.S. Toyota's operations have taken us into states like Indiana, Kentucky, Texas, and beyond. We have design and engineering facilities in California and Detroit. We've got a very strong on-the-ground level of investment because a basic principle of Toyota is we build where we sell. And the U.S. is a top 10 market in the world. So is Canada. So it makes sense for us to be invested in both countries and to work back and forth. And that level of integration between our operations, the dependence on each other's suppliers, is all part of the benefits, I think, that have come out of NAFTA and that relationship. So we're going to be talking, I think, not just from the corporate executive level, but from the level of our associates about the importance of jobs, about that investment, and what's happened in the economies for both. And I'm convinced that those voices will be heard.
So you mentioned earlier that if we had harmonization with jurisdictions like the European Union, that would give you or gain you entrance into Europe and make it more affordable, I suppose, to move into Europe. Is that something our government should be considering and possibly encouraging the Americans? Because let's face it, it's the Americans that make the rules.
Yes, I'll say from Toyota's point of view, we manufacture 2 vehicles right now that are quite popular in Europe. Actually, all 3 of our vehicles are popular in Europe, but one of them they manufacture there. Access to the European market would be good. It would be a good outlet for us. But actually, right now, we do not manufacture a vehicle that's saleable into the EU because they have different standards, different vehicle crash testing standards, different lighting-related standards, and that's not something that's impossible to overcome, but it is something that we would have to overcome.
Scott?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I've only got a minute. I do want to ask you this question. Are there any plans for Toyota to build heavy-duty trucks for North American market?
So we build medium-duty trucks through our sister company, Hino, and we currently have a heavy-duty truck that's powered by fuel cells that we're using in a demonstration in the U.S. So there's some possibility that will also develop.
And is that being manufactured in Canada? Is that manufactured, the heavy-duty trucks? Canada or United States?
The medium-duty trucks are being produced here. The heavy-duty truck it's a pilot right now, coming out of Detroit.
Okay.
Thank
I think
you,
I'm out of
and,
time. Thank you very much.
That wraps up your time. We're just going to have one more MP on docket here, and Mr. Fonseca, you've got the floor. Go ahead, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I proudly drive a JAMA built car, I guess, from one of your. I won't say which car it was. It was actually it was manufactured here in Ontario. But I asked myself about the car. So the all the pieces, components, etc., must have gone back and forth across the border. We hear often 6-7 times. How, is it a Canadian car? Is it an American car? Really, it's a North American car, and I don't even know if some of those pieces came up from Mexico. Can you kind of take us through that? How much of a car is really? I know it may finish and come off the line here in Canada, but a lot of it could be American.
Most of it's North American.
North American.
Say in terms of content, as I said earlier, about more than 50% of it is coming from the United States. A lower percentage coming from Mexico. It's mainly electronics, wire harnesses that we will get from Mexico. You need to understand that it costs a lot of money for us to ship parts, and we tend to centralize our supply chain near to our manufacturing base. We do import parts from Mexico. We import parts from Japan, but there's always economic factors that cause us to centralize our supply chain near our manufacturing facilities. But right now, we're a strongly North American car.
So from what we've heard in terms of if any tariff was imposed going back and forth across the border, have you envisioned something like that? What would that mean to those parts? So parts coming over, it gets a tariff from the U.S., and then if there was a tariff going back the other way, how would that even work? Would that be possible?
To Stephen's point earlier, at some point, I think a company would make a decision whether it's worth it, and then make a decision if they just want to import an entire vehicle. For instance, Toyota makes vehicles in Japan. Would it be cheaper for Toyota to bring a Japanese-built vehicle into the Canadian or U.S. markets and just pay a 2.5% tariff on the vehicle into the U.S. or 6.1% into Canada, rather than looking at the 3,000 parts we have in a car and paying a 2.5% tariff or otherwise on every single part every single time it crosses the border?
Sure. Now, we've had a great deal of success. We've had a great deal of success in terms of landing assembly plants here in Ontario. So Toyota and Honda, we mentioned Alliston and Woodstock, Cambridge. The ingredients that have made that happen for you to be able to go to the global table and say where we have our competitive advantage is that sometimes it's a low dollar. It could be the workforce, the infrastructure that's there, supply chain, etc. Can you take me through a little bit of that? Like, how do they all stack up? What's most important? What would be like number one for you?
Manufacturing cost per unit is how we're judged. We compete within Toyota for manufacturing mandates, and we get compared to other jurisdictions in terms of, for instance, if they make a RAV4 in Japan or they make one in Russia or China, how much does it cost us to make that versus some other jurisdiction? It could be the cost of labor, which again is your Canadian dollar. It could be the cost of electricity. It could be many factors, but where we generally do well is our manufacturing efficiency. So spreading out, for instance, fixed costs over more units. The more efficient you are in your production, the better you are. Our reputation for quality and our reputation for delivering, the orders that are made by our sales company.
Now, our economy is doing quite well. Unemployment's down to 6.5%, I believe. Our growth rate has really taken off here, especially in Ontario. And we've heard that there are some shortages in terms of skilled workers. Has that been an issue for you in terms of finding talent? I know we're attracting a lot, but has that been an issue?
It's been a challenge. I wouldn't say that it's held us back in any way or affected us directly in a negative way, but yeah, it is hard. Actually, skilled trades is an example we require. Finding them quickly is a challenge. I wouldn't say that we have a shortage right now, but it's definitely harder to recruit and bring in those people.
And the skills requirements are changing now, and we're competing against other high-tech sectors for valuable employees with good training and experience. So we have to pick up the pace on the way that we attract people to the industry generally.
So would you say the technology triangle there with the Kitchener-Waterloo area would be that would be a driver, that would be something that you can take to that global table?
Absolutely. One of, I should have mentioned it earlier, but, one of the aspects where we're particularly strong is in local innovation around manufacturing technologies. And we have a lot of local partners, suppliers or technology providers in our area that we draw from, and other jurisdictions simply don't have that. Our operations in the U.S. can't compete with us in terms of local innovation.
Thank you, and that wraps up the time. I just got a couple quick questions, and you might already answer these questions, but just for Toyota and Honda, first, how many vehicles did Toyota produce in Canada a year?
Last year was slightly over 600,000.
That's like over 2,000 a day.
Yes, we have 3 plants, 2 in Cambridge, 1 in Woodstock.
Yeah.
We build a car every 55 seconds in 2 of those plants and every 2 minutes in the other plant.
So about what would be the 70% U.S., 20 here? And how much would go to Mexico, or what's the breakdown?
We don't Toyota doesn't currently ship a car to Mexico. We have in the past.
Okay.
We do make about 81% goes to the U.S. and the rest remains here in Canada.
What about Honda?
So last year, just over 400,000. We have 3 plants in Alliston, 400,000 cars, 100,000 sold in Canada. So every sort of 3 cars goes to the U.S. And we build the Civic and the CR-V. And as I was mentioning earlier, the CR-V market, the subcompact SUV market, tends to be the market that is growing a lot right now. So a lot of our
thank you.
CR-V.
That's an impressive. The 2 years together, it's 1 million cars a year coming out of Canada. That's pretty good. That wraps up our time, folks. Thank you for coming and the presentation. We're going to work hard to continue having this great trade relationship with the other countries and hopefully expand on it. And we'll be sending you a copy of our report as we wrap up. So we're going to suspend now and go on camera, and we're going to be only a few minutes, folks, because we got 7 items on the agenda and future business. So thanks again, folks, and we're going to stop. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.